right, so we're going to start talking about the specific parts of the digestive system, and obviously we're going to start with the mouth, because where else would you start? All right, so the oral cavity is where mechanical and chemical digestion start. And it's got two parts, the vestibule and the oral cavity proper. The vestibule is this space between the teeth and the lips. And you remember a vestibule is an opening to a space, so that makes sense. And then the oral cavity proper is from the teeth back to the back of the tongue, but doesn't include the oropharynx. Okay, it's just about to here, to the uvula. Now, the lips are actually the ends of the cheeks, primarily formed from the orbicularis oris muscle. You learned that. You remember that from when we learned the muscles. And it's covered with keratinized stratified squamous epithelium. It is covered with skin. And the reddish hue of your lips comes from lots and lots of blood vessels just under the surface. And you know the technical term for lips is lips, or labia. The gums are called gingivae, and they're covered with, they're mostly dense irregular connective tissue. They surround and protect the bone and the teeth. The gingivae are connected to the lips with a labial frenulum, top and bottom, obviously superior labial frenulum, inferior labial frenulum. And what that does is just prevent the lips from separating too far from the gums themselves. The top of the oral cavity is called the palate. It separates the oral cavity from the nasal cavity. The hard palate is formed by bone. So we talked about that when we were learning the bone. The hard palate is made from the maxillae and the palatine bones. And that's about the anterior 2/3 of the palate. And it does have ridges on it called transverse palatine folds that help to manipulate food. So your tongue can press the food up against those to smash food and then help to move it around the mouth. That's part of mechanical digestion. The soft palate is the back of the roof of the mouth, the posterior 1/3, and it's muscle covered with an epithelium. The little tippy thing at the end is called the uvula, and the uvula and the soft palate elevate when you swallow to block food from going into the nasal cavity. You remember that from the respiration lectures. So this is from the side. You can see the hard palate here of bone, and then behind it the soft palate, and then the little uvula hanging down at the end. Now the tongue is primarily made up of skeletal muscle covered with an epithelium that includes little papillae that give it texture and provide surface area and contain the taste buds. The tongue is attached to the floor of the oral cavity by a lingual frenulum. So you remember these two are labial frenula. This is the lingual frenulum. If you don't have a lingual frenulum, then you can bend your tongue all the way back into your pharynx, and you could actually choke very easily actually on your own tongue. So don't do that. And the tongue helps us to make sounds, also is really important in mechanical digestion. Once you've chewed the food and it's been mixed with saliva, which we'll get to in a little bit, the tongue forms a bolus, and that's this soft, moist ball of food and saliva that you swallow. The tongue pushes the bolus into the oropharynx and then helps push it down, pushing down the epiglottis and pushing the bolus into the esophagus. All right, so these are all the structures in the oral cavity that you need to know. The lips, the vestibule, the teeth, you know what those are, the hard palate, the soft palate, the oral cavity proper, the uvula and the oropharynx. You already know the epiglottis and the trachea. And there's the esophagus where you swallow. And then over here we have the teeth, the palatine folds, the transverse palatine folds in the hard palate, the soft palate, the labial frenula, superior and inferior, the tongue, and the lingual frenulum. And that's where we're going to stop with that one.